So if you didn't see, Sony recently dropped the price to PlayStation Now, making it $10 a month or $60 for the whole year, making the service a lot more compelling. But in doing so, people are now making comparisons between that and Xbox Game Pass and talking about which one's better. So in this video, I think it's good to actually discuss the differences between these two and talk about why it really doesn't make a whole lot of sense to compare them either. So before even getting into the minutia of the conversation, let's go over the facts and the key differences between both these services. Starting with Xbox Game Pass, which is a download-only service for games. Microsoft claims over 100 titles are available. Realistically, I believe they're over 200 now, so I'm not sure why they're advertising that just yet, but there's different tiers to Xbox Game Pass. It's just for Xbox One, or for PC, or for both Xbox Ultimate, and that also rolls in Xbox Live Gold service as well. Games are added over time. Games don't always leave. $15 a month for Ultimate, $10 a month for Xbox One games. The most prominent feature about Game Pass as of recent is that major blockbuster games are coming out day and date at retail, at digital, and on Game Pass, making these $60, $40, $30 games coming out day one a steal on Game Pass. Now we go over to PlayStation Now. This is Sony's streaming and download service. You have over 800 titles in total, spanning across PS2, PS3, and PS4 games. Not many PS2 games on there. Those are just the premium emulated PS2 games on the PlayStation Store with trophy support. The bulk of the library is PS3 games. 300 of them are PS4 games. The PS4 and the PS2 games are downloadable to the hard drive, a la like Xbox Game Pass. But everything on the service can be streamed. We now have the new monthly low price of $10, or you can bump it up to $25 for 3 months, or $60 for the entire year of PlayStation Now. There is no PlayStation Plus subscription baked into PS Now. However, if you don't have a Plus subscription, you don't have to get one to play any PS Now games online. For the most part, that's the brief facts and differences between both of these services. Now, the actual discussion at hand, so many people are really talking about PlayStation Now because of this new monthly low price. And many gamers have been really loving Xbox Game Pass, and for good reason. I mean, Microsoft is pretty much handing out a lot of these games. You have Gears 5 coming out day one, even a little bit early on Xbox Game Pass Ultimate. You have the Outer Worlds debuting on it. That's a great game that a lot of people are looking forward to. And, you know, if you have a Game Pass subscription, you're not going to have to worry about paying full retail price to play that game. Same with any of these other games that are debuting on Game Pass. And you've got a pretty great selection of titles available on the service. When we go to PlayStation Now, it has a much different history, being that it started as a streaming service. There were rental options, which was really weird, I think, for a lot of gamers. A lot of people really didn't understand the pricing scheme that Sony was going for, and it was certainly a beta phase where they were really trying to figure out what was relevant to the market and what made sense for people. And even then, it was so in its infancy because inherently people don't want to stream their games. And in 2014, obviously, that's not really a big concern to a lot of people. Then they moved on to the monthly pricing term. They started removing platform support. It was previously available on PlayStation Vita, certain smart TVs. That functionality is now gone. It is strictly PC and PlayStation 4s. For the longest time, it was just streaming PS3 games. Then Sony brought in PS4 games, still just streaming. Up until not that long ago, a little over a year, maybe just a year ago, Sony started allowing downloading of the PS4 titles and the PS2 titles. So as long as you have a PS Now subscription, you can download the game directly to the hard drive, just like what you'd expect on Game Pass, and you'd be able to play the game no problem offline up to 7 days before you have to authenticate the fact that you are still a PS Now subscriber. Back then, it was $20 a month, or you could pay upfront a year at $100, which, objectively speaking, is pretty much a great deal. I know it seems steep, and certainly I'm not trying to say $20 isn't a lot of money to some people. I'm not trying to say $100 isn't a lot of money. It is. It is very important to a lot of consumers that the price is as low as possible for people to get in, but it's one of those scenarios where, because the bulk of the library is streaming, and people don't want to stream their games, it's a service that is fighting many uphill battles, and Sony understood for the longest time that it's very much so in the early stages of just trying to bolster a library, enjoy the very small subset of people that enjoy the service, work out any bugs, work on the low latency, work on higher resolutions, and just make it a better streaming service over time, up until the point where streaming games does make a lot of sense for many households, not just across America, but the entire world, because that's another problem with PlayStation Now, is that it's not available everywhere. Sony says that they're covering about 70% of the PS4's install base. Now we're at 90, well, no, actually over 100 million systems sold worldwide. So 70%, you've got 70 million systems that are technically covered, but there's still many countries, very vocal countries, that want to try PS Now, and they're not there, even though they might have the proper internet speeds. But you may be asking yourself, why shouldn't we be comparing these two services? Now, here's the thing. I understand where people are coming from, because inherently they are similar in certain regards, but I'm seeing just so many conversations online talking about how Game Pass is so much better because they're getting, you know, these big debuts day one, and then you've got the other end of the spectrum of people discussing how PS Now just has such a massive library, and therefore it's just such an incredible deal that you really can't argue it, and there's just so many varied options in terms of what you can play and how you can play the games. And I think that's what's so weird, is that people are acknowledging how different they are, and yet they're still drawing these comparisons between one another. But let's really discuss this. The thing is, one is streaming. That's the main primary function of PlayStation Now. So many people seem to forget this part of it. And the library is substantially larger than Game Pass. Now, when you look at Game Pass, what's going on there? Why is it getting Gears 5 right away? Why is it getting The Outer Worlds right away? Blair Witch Project? Why is Microsoft going so hard on Game Pass? Well, because that's their strategy. Haven't you seen in recent years how these big Microsoft Game Studio games are launching day and date on PC now as well? Microsoft's going for services. They're going for subscriptions. They're going for just software sales anywhere. They've demonstrated that quite handedly, primarily because they've seen the Xbox brand not move nearly as many units as the previous generation. There's nothing wrong with that, but that's Microsoft adapting to their scenario. That's them adapting to the long-term future, to where they know at some point a console is not going to be their main driving force of revenue. In fact, consoles have never really been the main driving force of revenue. It's always software sales. And so that's kind of what Microsoft's doing. But another way to look at Game Pass's strategy overall is that the install base of Xbox One is much lower than PlayStation 4, and so they have to be a bit aggressive. They have to make these big player moves where they put Gears 5 on it almost immediately and sacrifice the potential $60 sale that they would see at digital or retail. Why doesn't Sony do something like that? Because that's the big thing. Oh, PlayStation Now is not that good because you're not getting you're not getting Last of Us on their day one. You're not getting Death Stranding on their day one. You didn't get Spider-Man. You didn't get Days Gone. You've got games that are a little over a year old just now hitting the service, like Uncharted 4, God of War, Infamous Second Son is a bit older. That's a 2014 game. And so you can see what Sony's clearly doing, which is safeguarding their big IP. That's been Sony's agenda for the past decade now, more or less, is those worldwide studios. Sony is in a position where they have, again, I want to say 90. They have 100 million plus PlayStation 4s out there. Look at the sales of some of their biggest IP in the PlayStation 4 generation. You've got Last of Us Remastered, Spider-Man, God of War, Horizon, Uncharted 4, all moving over 10 million units. It would make no sense at all to release the sequel to these games or the next big Sony IP day and date on PlayStation Now. It's just not worth it for them. You can see that allowing the download function on PlayStation Now is Sony's short-term answer for getting people into the service and trying it. It's a compromise. There's a reason why it came later. There's a reason why it's only now becoming a big push, because they want it to be this gateway into streaming once they've got it really figured out and they've got it fine-tuned. You can't just sell a streaming service. People don't want to stream their games. You offer them a service that has both, then people might jump in. Back to Microsoft. Game Pass is just games downloaded to the hard drive. It's not xCloud. The big conversation is going to be when xCloud comes in. What is that really going to look like, and what is it really going to do for consumers being on every single platform and having this immediate access to your games, and we can test the latency, the performance, the minimum internet speed requirement. These are the kind of things that we should really be discussing once it comes to the scene, once Stadia comes to the scene, because that's really PlayStation Now's primary function. The secondary is getting people in to actually, well, try streaming at heart. But if I could just dial back to those big Sony IP that are over 10 million units sold worldwide, that's telling you why the next Last of Us, the next Death Stranding, are not going to be on PlayStation Now immediately. You're going to see Sony hunt for that $60 retail price and digital price for a year, 2 years, 3 years, however long that game is really going to be relevant on the market, up until where you see it come out at $20, you see it maybe get offered on PlayStation Plus, or what have you. That's when it might make sense for Sony. Where on the Microsoft side, if they just straight up sold Gears 5, they weren't going to move as many units. They're not even going to get close to 10 million. It's not reasonable for them to expect those kind of numbers. Microsoft knows that. That's why their games are just going everywhere. That's the strategy of Game Pass. It's not a bad strategy. In fact, if you're an Xbox gamer, you are reaping the rewards heavily. And I can't really blame you to sit there and say it's better than PlayStation Now, because you're getting a great deal. It's an incredibly low price. If you're on Game Pass Ultimate, you've got gold rolled in there, so you're not worried about paying Xbox Live Gold anymore, and you're getting these big games day and date. That's the thing about, if you're primarily playing on Xbox in this generation, you are riding the wave of a lot of these really consumer-friendly things that Microsoft's been doing ever since Phil Spencer took over head of Xbox in 2014, trying to revitalize the platform, doing a lot of pro-consumer things, and that's all good. But you can look at it. Game Pass and PlayStation Now, much different. And they're also speaking a lot different on the market as well. The only data that we really have is from the Q3 2018 earnings of total revenue from subscription-based services. Now, if you've been on this channel for a while, you know we've talked about this number a few times. This is some of the most recent data that we really have. This is where we learned that PlayStation Now actually has 700,000 subscribers, which is less than 1% of PS4 users, so it's not very good. At the time, mind you, of Q3 2018. But you can see, as much as people disliked PlayStation Now, it held 53 some odd percent of total revenue in that quarter, compared to Game Pass and EA Origin Access and whatever else is on there. What does that really tell you? Well, it tells you that as great as Game Pass is, the install base for Xbox is not there, the interest is just not there yet, whereas PlayStation Now, even though it's less than 1%, it's making a decent amount of money. And I say decent because inherently that metric is not very impressive compared to these multi-billion-dollar companies for that quarter, so it's actually quite embarrassing of a number. But I will be the first to admit this data is now not really all that accurate, because so much has transpired since then. Now you've got a situation where Game Pass is getting these big games, so you know there's a huge influx of subscribers since then. You've got PlayStation Now, which is pretty much cut in half in terms of price, but at the same time, Sony has gone on record to say it's a 40% year-over-year increase. 40% is pretty big. So even though it's less than 1% of users back then in 2018, it could have crept over to that 1% now. It could be a little bit further than that now that we have this low price. So this data that we have, it is, even though it's like about a year old, less than a year old, it could be heavily skewed at this point. So that's fine though. But you can see, at the very least from the history, that what we've known so far, Game Pass, as awesome as it is, ain't really doing all that hot. PlayStation Now, not doing great either, but got market leadership technically, which I guess doesn't really mean a whole lot right now. But in the long term it might, because that's what we're saying. PlayStation Now is in its infancy. Sony wants people to get in on the short term so they can worry about that long term of streaming. And when xCloud comes in, and when Stadia comes in, and when people actually start to care about streaming games, I think that's where the real conversation is going to start about what's better, PlayStation Now and all those other things, and not necessarily Game Pass, where we may be in a scenario where Game Pass might not even really exist anymore, or need to exist because most people would be streaming their games. And that's a long-term future. It could be 5 years, 10 years down the line. Who knows? I still think, and I think a lot of people agree, that disc-based content is still going to be around for at least another generation, potentially longer. We're still going to be using controllers, so something like even VR is still super early into its life, you know what I mean? It's not... Technology grows exponentially, but it doesn't go as quickly as people, I think, give it credit for. We're still going to be using TVs, controllers, regular computers to play our games, and there's different delivery methods for that, but I think we're actually going to be in a land of a lot of options for quite some time before one really rises to the top again. Anyway, I think that's the end of my PlayStation Now and Game Pass rant conversation thing. I hope there was some insight out of this, and certainly this is a conversation that's going to fuel many comments, all of which will be on the end of ridiculous to actually rational, and try to be on the rational side. But if you enjoyed this conversation, I want you to subscribe for the best PlayStation news, reviews, and updates that are here on YouTube, and you should follow me on Twitter at Mystic Ryan, and send me pictures of your cat or dog or animals, whatever you have. I want to see them, and I should really start posting more pictures of Melissa on there. I just got to start being one of those people at this point. I got so many pictures on my phone. Actually, you know what I've been doing is, if she's sleeping on the bed, I'll walk up with my phone, I'll record a video, and I'll kind of nudge her or something, give her a little wake up, and she just makes this like little coo, like a little bird noise or something. Adorable to die for, I'm telling you. Maybe I'll put one of those up there. So that's why you should follow me. But that's it, and I will see you all in my next video. You take it easy.